Does he get any, what is it,
The NIL money?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually being even the third kicker, he got $100,000 to come over, so.
Oh,
That's awesome.
that's
Great.
Yeah, and a scholarship, so, a full ride, so I mean, every place he's been, he's had his full ride plus the money, so. It's like, must be nice, huh?
Yeah.
And he's the third kicker.
I just think with the first kicker, guys.
Yeah, I don't know
Or
what
the
they're
quarterback, or jeez.
I'm sure their quarterback's probably about the $4 or $5 million mark, so.
That's amazing. Well, you know what, I always thought they ought to pay him though, because.
I think it's starting to get a little out of hand. I think they're gonna probably put some reins on it here shortly. But, hey, he's making his money, so.
Yeah, make it while you can.
We're live?
Hey.
So this is September 18th, Utility Master Plan Project meeting. And Chris, go ahead.
All right, yeah, thanks, Mark. So this is the Utility Master Plan Project meeting to go over the current draft studies that we have for your 3 utilities. So we've got the water system, the sanitary system, and the stormwater system. Over the past, I guess it's been 6 to 9 months now, we've been studying and modeling your system to come up with any recommended improvements or recommended projects for each of those 3 systems. So I think this is the 4th time that this committee has gotten together to discuss those preliminary findings and discuss potential recommended project scopes. So start off, just a reminder of the OKRA schedule that we're adhering to for this project. The next upcoming milestone date is September 30th. That's when we can submit these draft studies to OKRA to get preliminary comments from them. In our experience, the preliminary comments from OKRA are mostly about completion of the study, if there's other sections that they want to see, and they're not really looking at specific content yet. So final PER completion and submittal date to OKRA is the end of the year. So we've got time between that September date and the December date to make any adjustments, changes, additions, subtractions to the study. And then end of February is when the resolution to accept the study would be completed, and then closeout would occur in March. So
The completion by the end of the year and submittal, that's just for the study.
yeah, that's turning the study into OKRA.
Okay, so that's not a decision on exactly what direction we're going to be heading, right?
No. So that's the next steps will be submitting the study to OKRA. OKRA will then review, approve, or whatever. The next step after OKRA has accepted your study is then to apply for a construction grant. Typically, the construction grant is based on the scope of project as outlined and recommended in your study, but you are not tied exactly to that. When you make that application to OKRA, you need to have enough scoping documentation together for them to at least understand the extent of the project that you are proposing, but it does not have to be the exact project that's outlined in the study. And your grant administrator will be able to kind of help coach you through that a little bit more as that's happening, but it will help prepare the documents for the grant administrator, for Shannon, to make those applications. I don't remember exactly when that application is due. I think it's around June.
Yeah, it's June.
It's around June or July, and then when did we hear about auditing? That was August.
August. Yeah.
It's typically around August when you hear whether or not your construction grant application is approved. So that's saying, A, this OKRA is going to give you money to design and build project X or Y or Z. So it'd be about this time next year or so where you would hear back from OKRA if you are awarded grant money to pursue the project. So to apply for a construction grant, you have to have an approved PER, and that's preliminary engineering report. That's the stage we're at right now, is getting you to the point where you have a completed and then approved preliminary engineering report. Any other questions on upcoming dates and deadlines?
So when did you say?
They don't have to be identified by the end of this year. The study is identifying potential projects for you, but then you can elect to select the recommended projects, something else on the list, or whatever. Just keep in mind that Okra is going to rank the projects that they award based on several different criteria. One of the biggest ones is, relative percentage of the town that's impacted by a project. So if you do, one of the projects that affects a smaller quadrant of town versus another project that affects a larger area, just looking at that metric, Okra's probably going to rank the larger area higher than the other. So you have a better chance of getting that scope funded than the other one.
Looks like it's June and December.
June and December? Okay. So June for construction application. So June would be, as Colin was
that's what it
saying,
was
that's
last
when the submittal is due. Probably around April would be good to have a scope pretty well identified.
And what's December?
It's just that there's another round. So there's 2 rounds of Okra. So the first round looks like it's due in June. The second round this year is due, let's see, it's due by October 24th. And they announce, it's weird that they have this. 1 round, 2 is due December 24th or December 19th, and 1's due October 24th. So I guess I need to see what those 2 differences are. I'm not sure. It looks like there's 2 rounds, but they're both.
Well, the boy won't be.
Well, they call that one
We're not
a
doing
round.
anything this year anyway.
Right.
Well, that's a round 2 proposal, and that's a round 2 application.
Oh, okay. So yeah, December. Sorry, I'm just reading off their website as we're going here.
Okay. So if there's no other questions, I can start jumping into the different studies.
Okay.
We'll start off with water. That's been the biggest, really the biggest utility with the most opportunities for projects or improvements that we've been discussing. So the draft that you have here is building on the previous one that we looked at in July. It goes through talking about the existing system, existing challenges or issues that the system might be experiencing. Earlier on in the project, just to rehash for everybody, earlier on when we started this study, there were concerns on water pressure and water supply. So early options were looking at ways to improve the system's delivery pressure and delivery supply rates. Well, as the study went underway and as Kurt had some time to get more familiar with the system, we found one of the reasons why there were lower pressures in the system. So
The closed valves.
the closed valves, yeah. Closed valves and limited routing options with those valves being closed. So once that was determined and we got the system modeled, we had a better feel for what pressure conditions in your system really were. And the long and the short of it is, under existing conditions, if you're looking at regular flow, if you're looking at fire flow, your system as it exists today has sufficient pressure to give everybody within the town adequate pressure.
At our current.
At your
Population.
current population, at your current usage. The next step we did was start looking at theoretical and potential development in the area to look at how that different growth areas would affect the system's performance. And again, what we're seeing is on an average day, so normal flow, there's no large draws such as a fire or a water main break or anything like that. The system should be able to have adequate pressure for foreseeable growth in the town. Next step further, if we look at a moderate, and this is discussed here in this study, if we look at a standard fire flow pressure condition, so that's 1,000 gallons a minute for 2 hours, and then looking at the furthest extents. So kind of what we modeled is if there's a fire on the furthest extent in town, which is Baker Farms, there's a fire out there and we're delivering 1,000 gallons a minute for 2 hours, what's pressure doing throughout the rest of the system? And throughout the rest of the system, pressure is actually looking pretty good. And we determined pretty good as in above 20 PSI. 20 PSI is the minimum delivery threshold that IDEM requires a system to provide. And I'd add that it requires a system to provide that under normal operating conditions. So if there is a fire, IDEM does not have a minimum system pressure that they mandate. Looking further into that analysis, we also did some scenarios where there is growth, where there is development, where there is more water being used by the town. And we're again seeing with that standard fire flow rate, the town system as it exists today is still in pretty good shape. Pretty good shape as in we're floating around that 20 PSI mark. There's opportunities to improve or grow, but it is performing.
I have a question on that. Like
Yes,
if
sir.
the pressure drops down to 20 PSI, is that enough for backflow to start happening back?
That's about that. That's the threshold where you then worry about backflow into joints and pipes where groundwater could start coming into your pipes.
But like, I mean, it would probably be minimal, but I know like out in Baker Farms, we have irrigation and we have backflow preventers, but a lot of people aren't really taking care of them. So I was curious about that.
Right. Well, and backflow prevention on an irrigation system, if that system were to fail, it's most likely to affect that individual homeowner.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it would be, if they had their sprinklers on and we had them on and then all of a sudden it dropped to 20 PSI, if it's gonna start backflowing or something. I was just curious, so. Okay.
No, that's a good question. And really, we're looking at minimum pressures within the main distribution lines, because that's the opportunity to expose the most people to potential contaminants. So there's a table in here, I think it's table 4 on your page 6, that gives some of those pressures in different areas during different fire conditions. And that's under existing conditions. So you're seeing the lowest pressure under all makes the most sense is out at Baker Farms. It's the furthest away. It's got the most pipe that you need to travel through to get out there.
So that's interesting. It says normal conditions pressure at 45 PSI.
Yeah.
But Kurt's taking PSI tests
Yeah.
out there.
58.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and that's where you're kind of going to see what's the difference between a model and
Right,
real world results. So the model we use is inherently conservative, and then some of the base conditions we're putting into it are also inherently conservative. 58 PSI was actually the supply pressure we programmed into this at the meter house. 58 PSI is corresponds approximately with the mid-range height of the water tower, and that's what provides pressure to you guys. So, that could have been a day where the tower was totally full. You've got the maximum elevation and maximum pressure coming out at you, and then it also depends on which hydrant you were testing. So this should be based on the furthest out hydrant, so the one that's at the north end of that last cul-de-sac.
Well, I tested the one in your yard, and then the new one on phase 2. Be the
So, but
east side.
you're saying that.
So I'm not surprised that you're seeing some slightly higher than what this is.
Well, I've seen it as high as 58, but then I've also, like, if everybody's home and people's irrigation's going, I've seen it drop down into the low 50s, high 40s. So,
Yeah, and this is also assuming everybody's got their water on, flowing at a normal rate. So it's a rate of 310 gallons a day, evenly distributed across every residence. But you guys don't actually use that much. 310 gallons a day per connection, per residential connection is probably, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it's 50 to 75% higher than what you're actually using. You're actually using 80 to 90,000 gallons a day. That 310 corresponds with more like 150. So again, we try to be conservative. We try to make sure that we're adding those safety. Your system is okay. We jump to page 10. So this looks at pressure deliveries with some different project improvement scenarios. So table 6 is, let me see, delivering results. Table 6 is based on, no improvements to your system, and then it's looking at the service pressure at the intersection of Dayton Road and Baker. So that first branch that goes into Baker Farms. So we're seeing, what the pressures are under those different conditions there. And then development model results, service pressure at Baker Farms. That's no development. The second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down there, we're looking at different growth and development conditions within the community. If we go all the way down to the bottom, that existing conditions plus full development, that's assuming we've got all kinds of growth in all parts of the town that are currently undeveloped. And then if we look at that table 7, that is going to correspond with that first row on table 4. So that's the hydrant that's furthest out in Baker Farms. So again, we're seeing under full town build out, anything and everything that could come in those areas we've previously discussed, under a heavy fire flow condition, that hydrant's going to be pretty low.
So that's not, this 5 PSI is the hydrant pressure at that?
That's the projected hydrant pressure at that furthest out point. And then the table above it is the pressure at that branch going into Baker Farms. So there's a considerable difference between those 2 points when you're looking at fire flow conditions. Now, I think when we're looking at that area, that's residential. That column where we're talking about 1,000 gallons a minute, the standard fire flow, that's the one that we should be using more, because that's what's going to be if there's a fire out there. If there's, God forbid, at one of the industrial sites, that's probably where you need to look at that heavy fire flow condition instead. If we're talking out like McAllister or something like that. But please keep in mind, these tables are simulating that fire or heavy draw occurring at your furthest out point, not at a point that's much closer to town. So pressure conditions would be much more favorable if we have a heavy draw that's closer to your service connection point. So there's a lot that kind of came out in there, but I think the biggest takeaway is that you don't remain true. Which is a little surprising based on what we were seeing earlier on.
What is it? Okay, so you said future projected or future growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what did you take into consideration for that?
So that is, let's see, if we flip back to these sheets in the back.
Where do I see 2-C?
Okay. So this one, low hashed areas, and then mixed use or industrial in the blue areas. I understand that there's several sections, Baker Farms West, and then another, I forget the name of it, that's being proposed just north of there. So those are included in that quote unquote full development.
I'm sorry, north of where?
North of the proposed Baker Farms West, I heard that there was a potential buyer there.
Well, Arbor Homes has always
Okay.
been interested in that property.
Yeah, so whether or not these are on the market, realistically going to be purchased or developed, we just went with the conservative assumption, like, well,
Everybody's developer.
right. Whether or not that's true, whether or not that actually happens.
You just went with worst case scenario.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So you're saying the Baker Farms West,
Yeah.
the property north of that, and then the property full build out is sufficient.
Yep. If you'll recall, the east one at one
Thank you.
location,
No problem.
that's when they were looking at putting in apartment
Oh,
buildings.
there it is, 2C.
Apartment
No, I see
buildings
where
have
it's at,
different
yeah.
requirements
It's
on
kinda hard
what
to
they
see.
need
That
to
way
be
it
able to
looks-
deliver for fire flow. So that's where we went from 1,000 gallons a minute to 2,500. It's a pretty big jump. So That's why the apartment buildings were not feasible given your current system.
Okay. So is that documented in here anywhere, what you just said?
Well, it's not, and it can be, but one of the things we were trying to avoid for the sake of the Okra study was getting too specific on exact developments that may or may not happen.
But this,
Any questions about that main takeaway regarding pressure and supply? All right. So
So you're saying on your study, you don't see where a tower or a loop station would be anything that would have to be implemented at this time?
not at this time. Not at this time. Now, if you're looking at, I think at one point somebody was talking about having your own water production system and not buying from Lafayette anymore. Well, that's different. Then you're going to want to have a tower. You're going to need to have
Sure.
booster pumps.
But then you'd have to do a whole new evaluation to see if it'd even be cost effective.
Big hurdles that you'd have to overcome with that one is just permitting. Indiana Department of Environmental Management is the permitting agency for water and wastewater. And since you are already regionalized with the city of Lafayette, they're going to want to see pretty good reasons on why you would want to be regionalized. I'm not saying you wouldn't be able to get a permit, but it would be more challenging. Than
They're pushing for regionalization more.
So with Lafayette, you were saying that we had like a really good rate with them, correct? I mean, with water, what we're buying, I mean, compared to what if we had to build a tower?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the expenses that you have in paying Lafayette, I mean, you pass through to the ratepayers as they make their rates. But then if you had to build that infrastructure, that's reworking your rate structure pretty significantly.
even with the rate increases that they're talking about.
Pipe in the ground is much easier to maintain and operate than mechanical infrastructure, by far.
About if there was additional pipe that was put in the ground, that would actually be an improvement to the system?
Yeah, so as we're getting through here,
Exactly.
yeah, some of the other items that we were looking at were water age within your distribution system, and then your ability to isolate sections and have operational flexibility within that. So with water age, that model will also tell us approximately how old water is in certain sections. Some of the on a couple blocks, and there's a half a dozen houses on it. Those half a dozen houses aren't really turning that water over very much. So, Kurt, I'm sure you're seeing it. You have reduced chloramine levels at the end of that, and then you got to blow off your hydrant from time to time to help keep that water fresh. Something that the town's reduced the frequency of having to do that. We've discussed before some of the potential areas to loop water mains to eliminate some of those dead ends. And that, again, what I'll say on looping, especially when we're looking at something that's only affecting a couple blocks, loops are always great. We recommend them if you can do them, but if you don't, you just have to blow off hydrants from time to time. So it's an operational thing that you've been used to doing. So we do have some sections in here that we've scoped out for eliminating dead ends and installing new loops. The big thing I want to add about loops is the benefit of doing that way is then you've got two feed points. Instead of having just one single branch that goes up a street to serve both directions along that pipe. Draw is still a big thing on that. If you're not turning that water over, you still will run into water age related issues. Kind of to picture a large dead end that you may not think of as being a dead end is actually Baker Farms.
Right.
Like that's looped all the way through it, but it's residences, a lot of houses, they turn the water over faster than a shorter street will.
Especially during irrigation. It feels
Correct. So I know this is a segue a little bit here. I know you've talked about some possible revisions to your development guide suggesting that they have a looped water main, 2 feed points into their community. It's not technically required right now, so didn't want to take on that extra expense. Another benefit of loops is operational flexibility. If you've got more than one feed point into that, if you have to do maintenance on one of those lines, you've got a redundant line to do that. To continue with the example of Baker Farms, if they had an issue with that branch going into their residents, they're without water while that is being repaired or fixed. A single branch that comes from the city of Lafayette to feed the whole town, if there's an issue on that main line, you're in a condition where you either have to have some pretty serious bypass pumping, or much of the town or all of the town will be without water as repairs being made. So that kind of leads into one of the opportunities we looked at for improving that system, and that's essentially providing a loop for the entire town. Kurt and I have chatted about this a little bit, but this is, if we're looking in the study, should be alternate number 4 on page 18. And we're calling this one basically the Dayton Road Water Main Loop. So this would be a branch that comes off very near the meter house, travels to the east, and then follows south along Dayton Road to then connect in near the Clifty Falls and Dayton Road intersection. So basically that would give the town a second feed point. And it also has the benefit of removing that 12-inch as a pressure restriction. So that pipe is only so big, it'll only allow so much water in. By having this secondary feed, you actually do get benefits and improvements to pressure and supply throughout the town as well. We have established pressure and supply is not necessarily a major concern, but it is a side effect benefit of potentially getting this
So
improved.
is that essentially the same as putting an underground water tower in?
It's going to serve
Yeah.
a similar
Except
purpose
for
to that.
Supplying pressure.
Right. It doesn't supply pressure like a tower would, but it does give you an increase in that overall ability to feed, that overall volume that can come in on a high demand or a high draw.
It would just give you more flow, basically.
Yeah. Now, I think that's a good project to pursue, but I think the timing of that is something that we need to take into some pretty careful consideration. It's a pretty decent undertaking. It's about a mile of water main. We would project doing 12-inch water main on that. Significant amount of pipe.
Is there right of way in place? We'd have to acquire all the right of way.
You'd have to require a right-of-way or easement. Colin can probably speak to this a little more than I can, but we know that the county is generally a pretty willing partner when it comes to towns improving or expanding their utility infrastructure. I would suspect that getting right-of-way or easement along Dayton Road would not be horribly challenging.
Yeah, that'd be a conversation we'd have to have with the commissioners, but yeah.
Okay, so I understand it's already county property.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
that's good.
Yeah, we wouldn't be acquiring like from a private owner.
No, I can't remember. I think it's a 40-foot right-of-way, so it's probably about 10 feet on either side of the road, and 10 feet should be sufficient for use to not put your water main underneath the road. It would just be having a agreement with the county to be able to use that right-of-way for those purposes.
We'd have to probably put a bike lane in too.
Something like that. So that's one of the,
And I guess that being said too, that would be something that affects the whole town, so it would score probably better than.
it affects 100% of the town. I hate to pitch it this way because it makes me feel like we're just trying to check boxes, but sometimes with Okra and other government agencies, they're checking boxes. So they're going to want to see, 100% of the town is affected. You use buzzwords like sustainability and resiliency, which are true. It's going to improve the resiliency for the town. Like I had said, if you've got issues on that main line coming in, that's a major undertaking to repair it without putting undue burden on your town and the residences here. So there's a lot that Okra would really like about this project, but just because Okra is going to like it, it still has to make sense for you guys to do it. It still has to be a responsible use of grant funds, ratepayer funds, and what have you there.
I'd have to check on that right away because the lines on here show all the way to the road.
And then another thing to consider with that is, with it being a system-wide project, there's opportunity to refresh, amend, add to your current cost recovery fee structure. So that's where, if a developer comes in, they generally pay a cost recovery fee to the town. I don't recall what it is, but it's a certain number of dollars per acre. So when Baker Farms came in, they probably had to pay.
It's with the water and the wastewater together, it's $3,000 an acre.
Which is pretty low, actually.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been updated in forever.
Right. So with this being a decent sized project, and with any of the proposed projects being, with any of the proposed projects that affect the overall system being relatively large in magnitude, that's a pretty strong opportunity to adjust your cost recovery fee to reflect that. And then you can recoup those investments that the town made.
So interesting enough, when water was first brought to the town, that was one of the routes that was considered.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they decided to buy property where the proposed Gist Road is at right now, where our water system comes in there. So,
I was gonna say, 'cause there's a stub right at.
There's a stub there that
There.
almost looks like it was
And by the
meant
meter
to
house.
do that.
Yeah,
There's
right.
one by the meter house with that hydrant on it, and then
Yeah,
there's another
right
at the
here.
intersection. So I don't think I've seen that history if it was proposed to happen in the future, but it kind of looks like it was.
Yeah.
So, okay, so would that, it would still have in that scenario, it would still have just the one valve at the meter house?
Yeah, it would still have the one valve at the meter house, but it would not be uncommon for us to have another one connected, and then it's just always closed, and then have that get routed through the meter as well. This is really something that we'd have to work through with the city. They're going to want to make sure that your normal flow is metered, but I think there is a bypass configuration we could come up with that's normally shut, but in the event that you need to have a redundant system activated, opening a valve and using that. I think the city would probably have some feedback on how they would want to do that, but
I mean, one day that valve will have to be replaced. It's in that meter house.
mm-hmm.
And when that happens, the town will be completely without water at that point.
Yep.
For an ungodly amount of time. I'm pretty sure. And even if it's a whole day, it's still gonna feel like it's.
Right.
That's like anytime you're taking water away for an hour, it's gonna be
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
not convenient.
So, it would almost be ideal to be able to, is that the kind of bypass you're talking about?
Yeah, a bypass to be able to take one of those out of service without shutting off service to the entire town.
So maybe they could, if the valve was put on there, then maybe it could just be locked down and then,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And then
Right.
we would have to contact them and say, hey, here's our situation.
Well, there is a small bypass, like if it's drawn, if it gets below 50, then there's a straight line, that,
Yep.
I don't know what it's called, that, flow.
It's into the sea, right?
You know
Clay
what I'm
valve.
talking about?
The clay valve,
Yeah.
that's your pressure regulator.
So that's kind of like a bypass line, if you need flow, and it goes.
But it's still only fed from one single
Yeah.
point.
Right.
Okay.
So that proposed improvement, there's exhibits for that in the study. There's cost estimates for that in the study. If we go to page 22, that table 9 is the different alternate costs, and that Dayton Road loop is the one we're looking at. The water tower and booster station, water tower, booster station, and water main loop sections, those 4 should look pretty similar to the previous studies and recommended project scopes that we had put in there. So this Dayton Road loop is adding a 5th option for a system-wide improvement. And like we said, on the first 3, the water tower and booster station and those various considerations, the study's really showing that those are not going to give you the best bang for your buck or the most benefit to the system. And they're not as warranted as other opportunities.
So again, the maximum grant amount is $750,000.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Correct.
so the total project costs that we're looking at here, that's gonna be construction, that's got contingencies, that's got engineering, land acquisition, all those other soft costs in addition.
So anything above 750 is, well, we're still got a percent. What's our percentage of it?
The 10 or the 20?
I think it's 20.
20.
Okay.
We usually use about $1 million as that's your Okra project. So yeah, for any of these, if you're looking at doing them as a whole, there's a potential impact to your ratepayers and this is me not being too familiar with what the reserves look like. But typically we see a loan that needs to be taken out, whether it's a loan with the state revolving fund or it's a loan that you would pursue on the private market on your own to cover the rest of those costs. So we are not rate consultants and would not be able to do that calculation for you, but I would anticipate that if you're doing a project that extends beyond that roughly $1 million range, you'd need to engage with a rate consultant and a financial advisor to see what opportunities you would need to pursue to fund a larger project. The water main loop sections, if we go to the previous page, page 21, that table again breaks down the 4 different areas that we look at. Deerfield, which we had discussed the other week with McAllister and opportunities there, and then Delaware Railroad and Shady. The scopes of those really haven't changed, but then you can kind of see if you take one or some combination of those projects, those are falling into the Okra fundable range. But I will say that those are ones that don't affect as many people. So Deerfield affects the most, is the largest of those. So if I were to recommend one, it would probably be that one. Delaware and Railroad. Delaware, again, doesn't have a huge area of impact, but with that interested developer on that end, that kind of helps all parties to get that dead end eliminated. And then Railroad, that one would affect about 4 or 5 blocks of folks if you were to do that one. And then Shady is about 2 or 3 blocks. With the population densities out there, it's a lower impact compared to some of the others.
The Delaware loop just blows my mind. That number is,
Yeah.
it's just such a short distance.
It is.
It just doesn't seem like that's realistic.
Yeah. And these numbers are trying to be conservative with recent cost estimates that we've received from projects. And one of the not as useful tools on that is that we don't see many projects go to bid where it's really just a block or 2 of water main. So there's not a whole lot of resources for us to be able to reference back to get accurate costs on those. And then it's also kind of a thing where most of the costs that we get data on are from larger contractors, and to be quite frank with you, a larger contractor is likely not going to be as interested in doing a 1 or 2 block water main. Probably going to get a local contractor who's going to do it for a lot less than what this number is estimating here. So these are
The
conservative.
problem I see though is when we're picking projects,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to say, well, we don't, maybe we don't want to exceed this $1 million amount here. And so we'll say, these are the projects we're going to do. And based on this number, this is what we're thinking our funding is. So doing some of these other things would have
been an option.
Now we're not even going to consider them.
So here's one way that we in the past have dealt with that, because that brings up an excellent point. One of the ways we deal with that is setting up your bid documents and your design to include a larger scope in that. So say we want to just try to get a project that's $1 million. Well, my recommendation would be to design, just picking 2 of these, design Deerfield and Delaware, and have Delaware as an alternate bid. So base bid would be to do the Deerfield project. Alternate bid number 1 would be to do Delaware. So contractor will give you a price for both of those. And then you can choose to just pick the one because it's within the range you need, or bids come in good, hey, I can afford to do both. So there's ways that we can design several projects for you and then be able to have flexibility in how that's bid and how that's awarded to be able to maximize your grant funding.
But you might be able to do 3,
You might be able to
Might
do
be able
3.
to
So
do
that's
You
yeah.
can do more than one alternate then.
you know, so.
And then there's quantity of scale that comes along with that too.
Right.
That table 8 is assuming we have to do these all as individual projects, which from the BFS side means I got to get 4 permits instead of just 1 permit. Those all take time. I've got to mobilize for 4 different surveys instead of just 1. That all takes time. So there's
The mob and demob and
Right.
all that's those lump sum items that contractors bid will go down greatly if you combine them.
So that's kind of, if we're looking at trying to adhere to that minimum Okra range, I think that's a good way to remain flexible in how you're scoping a project, how you're trying to pursue one, and maximizing the dollars potentially available there. Does that make sense? And we've done that successfully with multiple communities where they've actually got to add. In Otterburn, when we did that water Okra project, we had water tower coating as an alternate. Bids came in good. They got to recoat their water tower, and we weren't sure if they were going to be able to do that. So.
Didn't they get an extra block of water?
They did not get an extra box of that. We had that included in the design in case it was going to.
But ultimately, I mean, there's quite a few different options for spending a lot of money here.
Yes.
Right? And ultimately, Okra's gonna come in, they're gonna say, well, this looks like your best project based on Okra's mode of thinking, right?
Maybe Shannon that
Shannon's she's really good at this. So she's gonna do a good job at taking what we've completed in the study, working through that with us to then build a narrative that goes in with that application to help kind of guide and fine tune that. Okra doesn't really pick the project that they think you should do. They look at the recommendation that you make to them and then see how that scores on their scoring matrix, and they go from there. But being able to say that we've got a lot of options and we've got flexibility and how those are procured and enacted.
Now, does Okra, will they take into account, you say, okay, we want this, but they decide, we want this, but they decide that's not what you should have that? Do they? No.
They'll just score you bad if it's something they don't like.
I mean, they will suggest something else, or?
During that initial review phase, most of the recommendations that they make would be something along the, can you clarify what this figure is? Can you clarify what you mean by this sentence? The scope is a little confusing. You might be disappointed with the lack of actual review that they perform on these.
Shannon's the real kind of gatekeeper on the wording and how to pretty it up, I guess is the best way to say it. So.
Yeah, I think she's
does a good job.
all the projects we've worked on with her have ultimately been awarded. Maybe it's us, maybe it's her, but I'm inclined to think it's her.
A little bit of both.
I'll say a combo.
Yeah.
Did I answer everything we were looking at on the water system? I know we jumped around a little bit there, and I'm kind of relying on you guys remembering our previous meetings. But from our end, and this is, please understand, this is me not having a full understanding of the town's current financial situation. From my end, I would recommend doing that Dayton Road loop as probably the most efficient and effective project and most beneficial to the overall system. But I understand financial realities are what they are, and that's where the council, the board, and makes the decision on really what magnitude of project you guys have the bandwidth to carry.
So what size line did you say it was?
12 inch.
It'd be a 12-inch line.
Would it be, better to go like a 16
Well,
or it wouldn't matter?
you don't really get a whole lot more by doing that. We did also look at a scenario of just upsizing the 12-inch you have coming in here now. And it's would be a real pain to build because you've got to switch over everything. So the constructability of that would be difficult. And the overall improvements to the system are not negligible, but they are lower and not really as appropriate to the degree of cost and degree of constructability issues that you'd run into on that. So upsizing that branch to a 16 doesn't get you as much as it costs you.
So, okay, so adding this other loop, that doesn't in any way give anyone an opportunity to say that what we currently have may not be needed.
That your current line wouldn't be
Yeah.
needed? No, that needs to stay.
It
You've
needs
got
to- it needs
You've
to
got a
stay.
few branches connected to it. You've got Deerfield North section that's connected to it. You've got some big industrial users near your intersection, near 38 on there. So there would be no reason to abandon that in favor of the other.
Good. Just want to make sure.
And there'd be
Good point.
added cost to pull all that out, replumb current connected users on that.
And then you lose your redundancy that you.
Then you'd lose the redundancy that you gain by adding that.
Okay.
That system sounds like it would work with, like you said, if you had to replace that valve, and you're gonna have a whole town down for a day, it would be nice to have something like that.
So there's a lot that this will help and can help with operation and really kind of having a safe and secure and I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, and consistent water supply under different scenarios.
Okay.
Okay. Happy to jump back onto water later, but I thought we could spend a little bit of time talking about sanitary system next. Just for, I know there's folks in here who haven't been in previous meetings, so I'll give a brief overview of what we looked at on the sanitary system. So 2 things we were looking at are your existing lift stations. You've got 4. 2 of them have been rehabilitated in the last 5 to 10 years. They're in pretty good shape. One of the larger lift stations you have is the Deerfield lift station. That one has pumps that are original to it. We've looked at the side, we've looked at the system there, and one of the items that we do recommend is rehabbing that lift station, replacing the pumps. There's some electrical improvements that could happen there, and some site improvements that could happen there as well. The study kind of steps through what the scope of those improvements could look like. I think that one is well within Okra fundable range, but I do understand that sanitary, at least from Kurt operating and the town's really history with the system, is not really an urgent concern, and I would agree that it's not as urgent a concern. The lift station pumps and equipment there we usually plan for about 25 to 30 years useful life for that kind of equipment. So we've exceeded that. We have exceeded that. So it would be reasonable to expect replacement of those pumps to be required soon. So there's cost estimates for that one in there. Again, these are conservative. There's items in here that you may or may not need when it comes to non-construction costs, given the scope of the potential project there. This is all assuming that you would go about it the traditional design bid build method, and you go about procuring it using the Okra methods. So they have some requirements on your financial and legal advisors that you have to employ on that. But
What pages?
I'm on page 19. That's the cost estimate for lift station rehab. So there's assuming you want to replace the fence. It's assuming you want full replacement of electrical and not just partial replacement. It's assuming some structural modifications to the wet well, though the wet well is in fine shape. So there are a few items in here that you may or may not actually need to do. The pumps and pump equipment, I think that's a pretty high estimate on how much those things cost. Anthony may have forgot to cut that down. So I think this is a little high. So We
That's
will
why it's a
revise,
draft,
we will
right?
revise that before actually submitting it. But you could probably, Kurt, go about procuring pumps on your own with
Well,
your pump supplier.
yeah,
We can help you get like your design set points that you need to meet on those, but
I know.
one of the, go ahead, sorry.
We did purchase 2 new pumps, at the beginning of the year. And then we're 6,000, I think.
Right, but those were for one of the other
Yeah,
stations.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
And,
No, we've got some rebuilt ones too, right?
yeah, and we have rebuilt ones for the Deerfield.
My hesitation with those is I don't know what the design set points of those are, and if they're easy plug and play at Deerfield, because it's got different flow rates that you need to be able to meet to not fill up the lift station. It's got different head conditions based on the force main and how far those pumps have to pump. So
Well, I mean, we have there's a spare one for the Deerfield lift station.
one of those flights.
Yeah,
Okay.
one would go out, we can.
Yeah. So I think this is a good opportunity for you to be able to kind of scale back and do this on your own. I will add that there are minimum or maximum amounts that you can procure on a quote basis without having to go through a full bid. I believe it's $150,000. It's either 125 or 150. So
Still be
anything
eligible for the grant split.
you could, but this is typically BFNS's recommendation for this. If you're going to use Okra funds, use as much Okra funds as possible, because you cannot use them again for 7 years. So if you use $100,000 of Okra money to rehab this lift station, you cannot use Okra money for a sanitary project for 7 years. So with that, you're best suited to try and maximize the dollars that you can on that one. So this doesn't maximize it. There you could see if there's areas that you like.
Chris,
Yeah.
so if they touch one, they can't get Okra fund for that one utility. for
Just
7
that
years.
utility.
So
You
if
could-
you don't touch a utility, you can still get a grant on that other utility if you wanted to, like stormwater.
You could get a grant for all three at the same time. The clock is specific to that utility. So
Just
if you
wanted to
do
clarify.
a water project next year and you don't do a sanitary project next year, you can do a sanitary project the following. It's not tied to, they're independent.
And and the study would still be legitimate for 2 years.
I don't know if there is a,
I
I don't know if there's an expiration date on this.
expiration date on it.
Okay.
I mean, I think after like 10 to 15 years, they probably you might want to
Well,
update it.
10 to 15 years is generally other things that have happened in
Right.
the system that is not as applicable.
I'd say
So
5
we
to 10
can,
years.
so we can pick and choose between these
Correct.
3 things.
Yep.
We do them all, do one, do 2,
Exactly.
Yep.
do none, whatever.
Right.
Any
It's always an
combination
option.
of those. So, and then the other major thing that we were looking at in the sanitary system study was we performed an analysis on wet weather conditions. So we looked at the flows that are measured at the transition point from the town to the city, and we matched those up with weather, rainfall, to see what kind of fluctuations we get during wet and dry conditions. There's some on wetter days, you're gonna be seeing more flow coming out of your sanitary system than on a dry day, which means you've got groundwater or cross connections where rainwater is getting into your sanitary system, but it's really not a very high amount. I think you were within
They're like 10% or something like that.
yeah, we've seen as high as 100% where you're doubling during rain, and I would not think that this is a degree of I&I, inflow and infiltration, that should be alarming.
Yeah, so that's, the downside of that coming in is that we're paying to have that treated, and it doesn't really need to be treated, it's just, it was inflow into it. But the cost for remediating that,
Yeah, the cost for lining pipes or
yeah, and
rerouting
doing
pipes
all that is gonna be, if our inflow was a lot higher, it probably would be
Right.
an easier consideration. But since it's not, it's probably almost normal.
Right, no, that's,
Better.
we see
At
10%'s
At
pretty
10%.
10%'s pretty good.
So,
Lower ones I've
ultimately
seen.
those.
It's one of the lower ones.
You're always gonna have some, right?
It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. You guys have the benefit of your system not being very old.
I was
So
gonna
the
say,
pipes
your
are in
system
good
is pretty new overall.
And
Compared
it's
to others.
plastic. So a lot of times where you see high inflow and infiltration, it's when you've got systems that are, it was built in the 20s and then added on to in the 50s and the 70s. So you've got clay pipe. And
Right.
that's-
It's just deteriorating.
Yeah.
Roots through it.
Or you've got old farm tiles that were repurposed into sanitary sewers, and farm tiles are meant to allow water in, so they're still doing that.
Yeah.
You guys are really in pretty good shape when it comes to your overall collection system.
Did you look at capacity?
We did. Using the same build-out scenario that we looked at in water, residential, industrial, anything and everything, the quote-unquote worst-case scenario, and your system's in good shape. You've got a 24 as far as capacity that we looked at. Peak rates that could be seeing there, your system's in really good shape. The 24-inch main line that you've got going across 65 is sized adequately.
Good.
So really with sanitary, the recommendation was to rehab your Deerfield lift station. We really don't have much more. The other recommendations were ones that we put in there because Okra wants you to put at least 3 in, but in all honesty, we had a hard time coming up with 3 good projects. Lift station consolidation, combining College Street and Cemetery was one of them, but it's more expensive than the benefit you would get from eliminating a lift station.
So what would the town's cost be on this 539,000?
So if you were gonna procure Okra funds for that, that's the 20 to 80. So you would be at about 110,000, and Okra would be at about 430.
That's what it is, 20%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 20%.
20% of whatever you ask them for. Did I do that?
Up to
math close right?
750.
Up to 750.
No, I rely on you on the math. So.
I always have a calculator, so it's not like they told me in high school where I'd never have a calculator on me.
So if in the next 7 years, okay, say we elect not to do anything with Okra money currently, within the next 7 years, we could say, okay, well, we might want to do this, but then something additional comes up. We find out that in addition to this, maybe we got something else. Then does another study have to be done?
Probably some degree of a revision to your existing study would need to be done. And I would have to ask Shannon the question on how that could work in getting grant funding to do that. Because these 3 studies we're doing right now, that's all grant funding from Okra for us to perform this work. And I don't know how that would work if you need to modify one of them a year, 2, 3 years after it had been submitted and accepted. I can try to find that out, but I don't know.
I mean, because that's the concern that, yeah, this is something that could be done, but maybe we don't want to invest in this because we want to hold our cards for some time.
Or you want to save your match funds for a water project or for this.
Right, and but then we get a few years down the road and we find something else and then this actually starts to deteriorate more because I mean that's what it all does, right?
Right.
And
it all deteriorates over time, and it's never cheaper than it is today.
but
Which really sucks.
but you've got that window somehow, and so I don't
Yeah, I can try to get that answered with Shannon. That's a good,
that's a good
that's a
Shannon
good point to
question.
bring up, and that's a good Shannon question.
I'm trying to look on their website to see if they say anything, but I don't see it all easily on the page here.
Okay, any other questions on sanitary? All right, brings us to stormwater. This one, the areas that we were looking at, kind of based on some of the early feedback that we got from the town, some site visits I made with Kurt to try and look at areas that hold a little bit of water during higher rainfall events. And generally the area that we were looking at is along that Clifty Falls, Shakamak, and Kegel Mills area. There's a couple areas with some low spots. There's some sections that have not as many inlets or stormwater collection infrastructure in place. And then, if you recall, the elementary school site improvement that came through, as we were reviewing that and having some back and forth with the developer there, we were, seeing that there's some deficiencies or potential size restrictions on that pipe that not on the elementary, but the pipe that the elementary school ultimately discharges into. So we looked at potential opportunities to add some more inlets and storm infrastructure along Clifty Falls Lane. Another option was adding some inlets and stormwater collection infrastructure on Shakamak Court. And then the last one we looked at was replacing that main trunk line between the elementary school and the outfall north of town, increasing the size of that pipe to improve its conveyance.
11.
11's looking at the costs for each of those three alternates, but I think we can look at some of the figures. I'll track down the figure I want to point you to.
Clifton Falls, east or west, in Deerfield or not?
Oh, east, not
Okay.
Deerfield. Yes, sorry. So if we look in the 11 by 17 prints towards the back, the first one we're looking at is on figure 4A. I'll give you a second to get back down. So that's got an aerial map. It should be the third paper, 11 by 17, the back of it.
Third from the back or the third from?
The third
The third
The
one.
third of the larger, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm not good at describing this. This is the third of the larger prints.
And we're looking at the back of the third page.
Yep, so it's figure 4A. That's alternative one, Clifty Falls Lane. The black lines in ST structures, those are your existing storm sewer pipes and existing storm manholes or inlets. This would be looking at augmenting that system and adding a few more pipe sections and a few more inlets on Clifty Falls, and then adding some on Kegel Mills. Looking over really the storm system as a whole, it looks like, which is not unexpected for a town of this size, it's kind of piecemeal built together. As town grows, they put in some degree of storm and they outlet it wherever they can. That's pretty common, nothing wrong with that. But then as more growth and as conditions change in those areas, storm we'll see it lag behind. So I would imagine in this case, Clifty Falls Lane was built, and then the different cul-de-sacs were later built, and their storm infrastructure was not planned in tandem with that larger one there. So one of the options we looked at is adding a few more pipes and inlets along those sections. The next figure, so the next page, is adding some more inlets and pipes along Shakamak. That northern one on the west side or east side of the road there, that's a low spot that Kurt and I had identified there. And then the half dozen other structures back there would be to provide drainage for the court, which doesn't have any drainage on it right now. The thing to point out with these, from the Oakland perspective, these are affecting a couple blocks. So, obviously flooding is not a good thing. We don't want standing water in people's yards. We don't want standing water in people's driveways. But one of the things that I think we'd rely on some feedback from the town on is the degree of ponding, flooding in these areas. Are we talking a day or two to subside? Are we talking weeks? Are people stuck in their driveways, can't get out of their houses?
I don't know
No,
that we've really received anything
Right.
in the way of complaints. There is the concern on that Chackamack Court
Yeah.
right there.
That one.
That guy has never said anything, or
Mhm.
that I know of, but, that
So kind of,
seems to be something
yeah.
that really does need to get taken care of, however that's resolved.
yeah, and what I'm kind of seeing on these first two is while they would be beneficial to the town, I don't know if Okra funds are the best way to do that. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought at one point the town was considering some of these areas for CCMG,
Well, so,
because that's
a lot of it's
another,
been done.
Yeah, I think Shackamack was done.
Shackamack was done,
And
and that's
think-
me not being
I
familiar
mean,
with.
Caglesville
And I-
was,
And I think they had to regrade it, cause I think it was a little worse than it is now.
Okay,
And they've regraded it a little bit down there to get the water going around, but it's still standing that there was no inlets.
Right.
At the time, so.
right.
so that's an interesting point, that can be incorporated into CCNG.
Yeah.
You can be.
When those opportunities come along.
So that's a good thing as you're looking at streets for CCMG, also taking into account storm infrastructure improvements along each of those streets would be a good thing to consider. Yeah,
So that was something that,
I thought that one hadn't been done yet. I must have been mistaken.
I think at least back here has been done over here.
Okay.
I'd have to look again, but.
He's pointing to Cable Mills. I thought that was on it.
I'd have to look.
upcoming
I mean,
years.
it's probably been almost 10 years ago now, but
Oh,
What, Cable Mills?
yeah, or was that more recent on that one? I might be thinking of this one down here.
I know we just crack sealed.
Yeah.
oh, excuse me.
What about the outflow for this though?
The outfalls, yeah, there's, if we look at the next sheet, alternative 3, that's the one that's potentially improving that trunk line out of Dayton Elementary. We see there's 3 or 4 outfalls into a ditch just north of town. And Kurt and I have kind of talked about that one, and I think it's unclear who's responsible for maintaining that ditch. Is it the town or the county?
Yeah, so let's see, that ditch. I think we talked about this one.
We walked one.
Yeah, that was the one from Republican to, Dayton Road.
So is it an easement?
That one I don't think is
The one we looked at.
the one we walked.
Yeah, I think we could not find any history of these through. So you'd have to get all the homeowners to want you to come back there and clear cut and remove all of that. And they're the ones who suffer if it floods back there, and if they're not having issue with it, then there's less reason to touch it.
But the one on Dayton going east down Clifty Falls.
I don't think I've seen history of a drainage easement through there. It probably was, just a field drain, field ditch for that ag field there.
Cause Deerfield
And
drains.
it's not a regulated drain that the county has on their database.
Sure. Cause Deerfield drains into that,
Ultimately, yep.
everything goes into there.
It's a major stormwater conveyance channel for the town. That I think it's unclear who's responsible for maintaining it. I don't think we have any knowledge of the town clearing it or dredging it or anything in the past.
Well, they seemed like they did something years ago. I think Harlow can tell you.
Yeah, and I remember, one of the residents right there said the town cleaned that section out east of Dayton.
East of Dayton Road, okay.
Somebody went back there and did
Somebody
something this
cleaned
year.
that out.
This year.
Are you talking the ditch back behind Clifty Falls?
Yes.
Yes, so it's been there, they did clean that out since I moved in here in 2015, so it was before I started on the council, so somewhere between 15 and 20.
And
they
that
did
was the town that did it, you're remembering? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, if you clean it then, it might mean it's yours to clean.
Just took ownership.
Yeah, we did some investigation on the easements and right away back through there. We'll do a little more digging, but we can scope that out as a recommended, or at least see what the degree of project would be on that one. I would be surprised if the accompanying cost gets you into a efficient Oka range. It might just be one you do when you rent some equipment or whatever you need, and that's your summer project.
Well, one of my concerns would be is, as long as you're allowed to do it, and if somebody that owned that property no longer allowed you to do it, then that would be a concern.
Right, and if it's not an easement that you own or you don't have the right of way to get back in there, you're at to a degree, you're at the
mercy of the landowner.
mercy of the landowner. Now, I think there is leverage that the county has to be able to, no, this is a drain that serves public interest, kind of have to do it.
I don't think that's a situation, that's currently the situation, but things change.
I mean, I think seems to be flowing fine there, but that water main break, we had all the water from that went down.
That dumped into that, yeah. And that kind of that does not flow into what's the name of that pond up there? The big house with the big pond, I think it flows
I
into
think
that.
it goes into that pond, yeah.
Oh, the one that.
Yeah,
On County Road.
Before the river? That's
Yeah.
the pond right there.
Yeah,
Pretty sure it goes into that.
the pond has a name.
The nameless pond.
That's not the name, Colin.
I don't see it, it's not showing up on that.
Well, it's owned by Fairfield Builders.
Is it, that property theirs? Or that?
Not everything but the house.
Oh, the pond is owned by them?
well, it'd be Fairfield. That's what's on that.
Well, no, but it's named after the guy who
Let's go down to South Pittsfield, call Fairfield.
well, those are called Fairfield Ponds, yes. But that particular pond, I saw a reference somewhere in here.
Yeah, I'm not finding the page.
Maybe it was just called that because it was referenced that.
And, I mean, it's, yeah.
There's a pond that goes in. Okay, so.
It's, the name's,
Just
That's
trust
pretty
us, there's
much-
a pond
that's
there.
pretty much it.
so, let's see, we were looking at the Dayton Elementary outfall, that pipe, that's kind of the third option we were looking at. That's one that impacts a larger number of people. There are easements that exist in there. I think it's a 20-foot wide drainage and utility easement. So in theory, you should not need new easement to do it. But what I will add, one of the construction challenges that you would encounter with that is that the pipe goes between houses, around backyards, and the houses are, given the size and depth of the pipe, they're fairly close together. So this is one that would be disruptive to homeowners as you're building adjacent to their homes. But there are pipes in the ground out there right now. And the red is the proposed sections that you could increase the size of to increase their conveyance capacity. But those are all replacement of existing pipes and structures in there. So
What page are you on?
I'm on the last of the larger sheets. figure 4C.
Before page 18.
Before before page 18, the last of the pages.
Front or back?
Back.
Oh, I see. So you cut, this is on the back side of the school here.
Yeah, and those red, the structures and pipes that we'd replace, so those are all existing.
So,
I don't know if you knew that you had as many structures and pipes going through people's backyards like
so
that.
is that all easement?
Yes,
Isn't there a pond back them, the football, or the baseball?
yeah, there's a dry
Small
detention
little-
pond, around the baseball field. The school owns that one. That's the one that all of the school's drainage goes to now, and then there's an outlet structure that flows into these pieces of infrastructure here. So I would not recommend, unless the school wants to try to partner and help pay for things, I wouldn't recommend changing much on their property, if anything.
So, when you were doing the study for the school expansion on the parking lot,
We didn't do the study, we just reviewed the drainage report and plans that T did.
T-Bird did that. And based on that, it really looked like it was almost iffy, let's put it that way.
Well, so the pipes that they have on their property are probably undersized for what the system is today.
Private lines.
The private lines are probably undersized for what they have today, which puts them at risk. It doesn't put the town at risk. If it holds water back instead of letting it out.
But there's not gonna be any additional drainage
No,
tied into anything off of their new parking.
no, that all still goes into their existing system.
And is that gonna flow back to the school, towards the school?
If there is a condition where there's a restriction or surcharge on the school's private line, it would affect the school, it wouldn't affect the town. The town would be affected if there was a failure at the pond's outflow structure, and the school is then letting more out than what it's designed to. So
I'm talking about the new parking lot.
yeah,
We're taking.
yeah, no, that gets held back by the school before it gets to the town's infrastructure.
Okay.
The pipe that it flows into is already, even if they were not doing this parking lot expansion, that pipe is already.
So
Surcharge.
those pipes aren't even shown on this map.
No, this only shows town of Dayton.
I
owned
see.
pipe.
Okay.
Yes. So the emergency breaker for the town, for the school is the school's property. If they have an issue, it backs up there, not into the town. So if we were looking at using Okra funds for a stormwater project, this would probably be the one that we'd recommend as a more efficient use of Okra funds, and having a larger overall impact for the town. But again, if we're looking at the overall footprint of the town, this is a smaller area. But with the town not really having and this is pretty typical for stormwater in smaller towns, you don't have like a centralized single outflow or treatment spot. You've got 10 outfalls all around town. So there's not one single section that all of town's stormwater goes through. So really, it's not feasible for you to have a stormwater project that affects the old town, short of designing a storm system for the entire town. And that's millions and millions of dollars.
So every new subdivision, every new, whatever's being built,
Every new development,
okay, somehow has to have stormwater plans.
yes,
Right?
this was newer since the 90s. Prior to then, it was kind of the Wild West. Developers could discharge whatever they wanted. Town still had to agree to it. But now the onus is on developers to detain their own stormwater and then release it to the town, to county infrastructure, to city infrastructure at the ordained flow rate. So Tippecanoe County has a mandated discharge rate for developers based on acreage and storm type. So Baker Farms, they had to put in detention to handle all the runoff generated by their site. That has a regulated release rate that it can dump out into the receiving system. Newest upcoming development, Dunbar Electric, they're proposing putting a small dry detention pond on their site to collect and store and slowly release all the stormwater generated by that site. Similarly, any other residential development that would or could come in, they have to store stormwater on site before they release it out. So the pressure is pulled off on the town to have regional detention or regional stormwater management systems to take on any and all things that could come from developers.
So the stormwater system itself on Baker Farms or any subdivision or whatever that's happening is the responsibility of who?
To maintain,
To maintain.
I believe it's yours, unless specifically noted otherwise.
So it's not part of, it's not the homeowners association.
Do you know?
I'd have to, yeah, that might be an attorney question, how the documents were written.
Okay.
Because you accept the roads,
Because the roads are
And the
yours, the
infrastructure,
water and
but,
sewer is yours.
yeah, I just don't, I'm not sure about it's a good question. It might be.
Maintenance of things like ponds has always kind of been unclear.
I
Inlets.
know we have the one big pond out there, the main one,
Yeah,
and I know that our HOA fee goes to that and maintaining the lawn. I haven't heard anything about maintaining the storm drains or anything, so.
I know.
Well, I was actually more thinking about the pond itself and that.
I know we
But
pay, that's part of our.
there's a
that
pond
upkeep, the
maintenance
pond
fee
floor,
or
so.
something. I think that's more common, but I don't have as much familiarity with those, but can try to answer that question.
Dave Buffy, that answer. I don't know if it's different.
But I know
in
like the
development.
inlets, like what we saw over here, this one over here getting all overgrown and everything.
Yeah.
Eventually that'll be an issue. Well, it's gotta be an issue with a lot of these, I'm sure too, right?
Well, I know our HOA pays for the guys to mow and take care of the pond and all that, so, and out front, so, I mean, that'll be taken care of.
Okay, well, you heard it here.
That's what part of our money, that's what part of that goes to, the money we pay every year for that, so I know that much.
Yeah, I think issues come up, and we've seen issues come up when, and this will never happen to you guys, when the HOA is dissolved. Who takes that one out?
Figure that one out, right?
Yeah. Stormwater questions for the study? I guess kind of the intent of us giving you these drafts was, I think if you guys see no issue of it, we'll plan to submit the drafts as written to Okra at the end of the month, but then obviously you can make any and all comments or suggested changes to it between now and the final submittal date in December. End of the month is not enough time for you guys to look at these, so I figure if you've got a month or so to flip through, comment, amend, and then we can address those. Either have another meeting to step through them, or if you just give me copies of them to look over, or have questions to talk about, that's what we're here to do.
You done?
I don't have any other items I wanted to go over.
Does, anybody want 3 minutes of public comment? Come up, please.
It's just a question.
Yeah.
It was mentioned that the cost recovery fee of $3,000 per acre was relatively low. Is that determined by a council?
The cost recovery fee is usually one that your attorney will help you with. and getting together, and then your engineer will
Okay.
usually help you with
Is
as
that
well.
per project, or is that like an ordinance where this is how much we're gonna charge? Is it straight across the board, or is it per development?
It varies from
Oh.
community to community. So to give the example of Lafayette, they've got a couple dozen service areas where each of those service areas had a capital expense associated with them. So if you are a developer and you want to build in service area 21, service area 21 has cost recovery fees specific to that area, and those correspond with a project. So let's say Project A happened to open service area 21 up for development. That had a cost of $1 million, and it serves 1,000 acres. The quick math, and usually what those cost recovery fees are based on, is project costs divided by acres served, and that's what the recovery fee per acre would be. With Dayton, your cost recovery fees were established in the early 90s. It was probably based on the cost to build your system and the acres that it could serve, and it's the math of doing that.
Is that something that the council should probably address?
I don't know if it starts at the council or how that typically works, but I don't think a cost recovery fee would go into effect until you have a major capital improvement plan that happens, and those are based on construction costs and not necessarily engineering estimates. So cost recovery fees are usually established after a project has been bid and the true construction cost is known. But I think it's important for the council to have that on their radar, to know if you're looking at getting a bond to do a project, knowing that you can recoup that cost through a
That's
cost
why I was
recovery
asking.
fee.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
Anybody else?
I got a question. One thing on those ponds and stuff, from what I remember before, I think all these new developments, like Baker's Farm stuff, they take care of their own ponds. It's not up to the town. The maintenance is for, you're right, the homeowners and stuff. When, in this process, when do you actually decide? Is it at a public meeting, at one of these meetings, a public committee meeting? The town decides on which of these things to pursue and do.
Usually that's a council action. So whether if it happens at a regular council meeting or if the council calls a special work session meeting to step through that, the full scope of a project that would be then applied to for Okra, that's a council decision, not a
Okay, and
committee
I didn't hear you back there, when did you say that had to be decided on which
decision. Spring next year.
spring? Yeah.
If you were to go after
Yes.
the next round of applications. If you weren't, then you don't really have to decide, right?
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks.
Anybody else?
So our next step is with this, what's our next step with
I guess
these three?
your next step, review the studies if you want to, and if you have comments or thoughts,
Get a hold of you?
get a hold of me and we'll go over them. If there's enough comments from the group that we want to reconvene and have a larger committee meeting again to step through those, then that'd probably be a good idea. But
We're
If
gonna
it sounds
submit
okay
these,
to
right,
you.
at the end of the month,
yeah,
and then we'll have after the comments, he'll incorporate
yeah.
it.
If it sounds okay to you, I'd like to submit these to Okra for their really high level bookkeeping comments at the end of the month, and then if we could look at maybe you guys having a chance to review and provide any comments you have by Halloween. So that gives us November to make edits based on your comments or Okra's comments.
Okay, after the 31st.
So then Okra's gonna come back and say yeah or no, and then.
Before December, Okra will come back with, hey, these look great, or you need to add a section to discuss XYZ. They might come back with that, they might not. I think it's optional to submit a draft to them. it just makes that final review hopefully faster on their end, because they know, oh, we've seen this one already.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work done on this, obviously, you know, and a lot of, I think a lot of questions that we had, you know, got answered. And a lot of good options have been presented for different things. So, I'm real happy with what you guys have done.
Thank you.
That's all Chris. Chris and Anthony.
All right, Chris.
I like to hear it. I appreciate that feedback. That's good to hear.
All right.
Thanks for your time, folks.
Thank you.
Meeting
Appreciate it.
adjourned.